The hospital room was filled with the gentle springtime sunlight. As it got colder, I clutched my mother's hand in the white room that smelled like disinfection. Even though I was only 11 years old and couldn't quite comprehend the seriousness of what was occurring, I could painfully sense that my mother's hand was losing strength every day. I'm 37 years old and my name is Sally. This is the tale of how a family's ties broke down and how fresh strength was found. We were a typical family, endowed with straightforward but guaranteed happiness, until my mother became ill. My mother, Cheryl, was a housewife who took care of the household, while my father, Kevin, worked diligently as an office worker at a smallish trading firm. Even though we didn't live in luxury, our family always went out on the weekends. We had a custom of driving our old automobile to the neighboring countryside. My father would play nostalgic pop music while driving. My mother would happily, albeit off-key, sing along to Billy Joel's "Just the Way You Are" whenever it came on. I secretly loved seeing my folks like that from the back seat. On occasion, I would order my favorite omelette when we stopped by a diner. "Let me have a taste of yours too, Sally," my mother would offer, and then nibble on my dish. We enjoyed these little pleasures on a daily basis. The winter of my 4th grade year was when the shift started. Suddenly, my mom stumbled and fell down the steps. She dismissed it with a chuckle, but she began to become ill more often after that. We initially assumed it was simply exhaustion, but as her hospital stays and late-night phone conversations grew, things began to seem different. Our weekend excursions dwindled in frequency, and my father's face darkened with every day. The typical liveliness was absent even from the sound of chopping coming from the kitchen. Bit by bit, my mother's cuisine gradually started to taste different. My mother was weeping in the living room one day when I got home from school. My mother saw me, startled, and wiped away her tears. "I'm fine, Sally, I just got something in my eye." I can still clearly recall the fake smile she gave me at that very time. Even though she never spoke to me, I could feel the shift in the atmosphere. At night, my parents' chats turned into whispers, and occasionally I could hear cries that had been broken. My father put me on his lap and attempted to explain in a shaky voice the day my mother's hospitalization was decided. "Sally, Mommy is," he said, but his words were jumbled, and I ultimately didn't get it. Nevertheless, I knew that something awful was occurring when I noticed the tears that were streaming down his face. My mother deteriorated quickly after being admitted to the hospital. Her once lustrous golden hair fell off as a result of the chemotherapy, and her cheekbones grew sunken. Still, she made an effort to appear happy whenever I paid her a visit. "Are you enjoying yourselves in school, Sally? Are you adequately consuming all of Daddy's dinners?" I made an effort to respond in a cheerful voice, but occasionally my voice faltered. Then that Tuesday evening arrived. There was simply the sound of the heart monitor in the white hospital room, an antiseptic atmosphere. "Mommy, wake up." I called out to my mother several times, but she never responded. I could feel my father's shoulders shaking as he pulled me close. Nurses were moving hurriedly around us, but I couldn't see the situation well. I thought I was in a horrible dream, but this was the real world. A church close to my mother's family home hosted the funeral. Black-clad individuals arrived one by one to offer their respects, and I robotically reiterated my gratitude. The only object smiling softly in the flickering lights was my mother's photograph. Our family's composition underwent a significant transformation with the passing of my mother. My father became so engrossed in his business that he spent less time at home. After returning from school, I would frequently have supper by myself in an empty house. I would occasionally cry when sitting in front of frozen dinners that were being reheated in the microwave because I remembered my mother's handmade meals. My father and I had very little discussion, even when I visited him sometimes. My mother's absence was difficult for both of us to comprehend. My father started out one day 6 months later by stating, "I have something important to talk about." I could see a mixture of fear and hope on his face, and my chest constricted with a stifling sense of dread. "Sally, I want to introduce someone special." The woman who entered the living room today was not at all like my mother. She wore fashionable clothing, had long brown hair, and wore gaudy makeup. Her grin seemed strange to me right away. She came up to me and said, "Nice to meet you, I'm Millie," in a voice that was sickening sweet. "Sally, I've heard a lot about you from your father. We'll all be a new family from now on, will we?" Something within of me froze at those words. I felt an unfathomable rage at the ease with which she seemed to take the place of my mother. However, I made the decision to repress such emotions after witnessing my father's joy. Everything moved quickly after that. Acting like a young couple, Millie and my father started going on dates often and decided to get married in 3 months. Something inside of me froze once more the day my father told me of their choice. He declared, "I've decided to marry Millie," in a voice full of enthusiasm. Only 6 months had elapsed after my mother's death, and during that little time, my father was attempting to start again. I'm against it. I was surprised by how harshly the words came out of my lips. My dad's face grew serious. "Why?" "Millie is an amazing individual," he said. "She genuinely cares about you, too." However, I was still unable to comprehend her as a person. It came too soon. In a home that still had the warmth of my mother, I wasn't prepared to embrace a new lady. "Have you forgotten about Mom?" My father's face lit up with grief as I hurled those words at him. Whispering, "Of course not, but we have to keep living," he added. My heart was struck by the weight of his words. I sobbed in my room that night. As usual, my mother was smiling softly in the picture frame. What would she say if she were still here? After giving things some thought, I finally dozed off. "Sally, your father has the right to be happy too, doesn't he?" Millie told me those words one day. I sensed an unsaid pressure behind them that said, "Don't get in the way." I turned to face my father that evening and inhaled deeply. When I said, "I'll try to accept Millie," speaking those words required more bravery than I had anticipated, but after witnessing my father's joy, I was certain that it was the right choice. Certainly, it was not an easy decision. Sometimes, though, you have to put aside your emotions in order to prioritize the happiness of a loved one. Maybe this is what growing up is all about. As Millie had requested, the wedding took place at a 5-star hotel. Even though Millie was stunning in a white wedding gown, I couldn't help but notice how different she was from my mother every time I looked at her. As a bridesmaid at the wedding, I feigned a grin. My mother's picture was never on the altar at any point during the wedding. I had no idea how terrible the new life that followed would be. One by one, Millie started making changes about the house. The wallpaper was restored in vibrant hues, and the more traditional, homey furniture was completely swapped out for more contemporary items. Silently, my mother's mementos were transferred to the storage area. "Outdated things aren't necessary for a new family," Millie commented as she packed the treasured possessions of my mother into cardboard boxes. My father did nothing except watch. I sneaked inside the storage area one rainy day. An ancient recipe journal was discovered in a dusty cardboard box. I found the recipe for the omelette I had always liked as I turned the pages, which were penned in my mother's exquisite handwriting. There was a message in the margin that said, "Happy birthday, Sally." I allowed myself to become lost in my mother's memories as I traced the words that had become hazy from my emotions. I saw her standing in the kitchen, her soft hands holding a knife, and her smile as she gave me a sample of the food. Millie would never be able to replace these riches, which only I could comprehend. I sneaked the recipe notebook into my room that evening. I wanted to preserve even a tiny bit of my mother's warmth, even if it was only a minor act of rebellion. Then I started stealing things from the storage area that belonged to my mother. I kept her picture hidden in my room where I could view it, and I would speak to her in private at night. "Mom, what should I do?" My mother in the picture smiled softly, but there was no reply. Derek, my father and Millie's newborn child, was born shortly after the wedding. I was 12 years old by then. I had a range of complicated feelings when this small new life entered my existence. Derek was a cute baby with plump cheeks and wide eyes. Sometimes he would make facial gestures that made me think of my mother. I had an odd spectrum of feelings throughout those times. Although he was not my mother's biological relative, this youngster was definitely my brother. Millie's attitude became even more controlling once Derek was born. "Now we can finally be a real family," she added. I could feel her intention to leave me out behind those remarks. Nevertheless, I did my best to treat Derek with kindness. I brought him to the park and read him picture books. It was impossible for me to harbor animosity against his naive grin. But Millie seemed dissatisfied with the relationship I was developing with Derek. She made every effort to distance herself from the family. She made gossip about me among family members, saying I was mentally sick or socially awkward. My father took her word for it, and I started to drift apart. I found out one day that my desk drawer was empty of cash. Millie raised my alleged stealing habit with alarm during a family get-together. "I'm sure there must be a reason why money keeps vanishing from the house lately," Millie rambled. Teens frequently struggle with things they can't talk about. Millie's performance was perfect, yet I frantically refuted her allegations. Millie begged, her eyes welling with tears. "I'm truly worried about you." Our relatives looked at her performance with sympathy. After that, odd phone calls began to come from the school. They said that among my possessions, stationery bearing the names of other pupils had been discovered. Never had I placed them there. Although he didn't chastise me, my father's eyes were filled with disappointment. "I want to believe you." I was much more offended by their statements. Later, I unintentionally discovered Millie entering my room covertly. She was attempting to stuff something into the drawer on my desk. Everything made sense at the time, but I knew that nobody would take my word for it. The only thing that kept me sane at all was Derek. I fought valiantly to keep myself intact each time his naive smile came to my rescue. Still, Millie found that intolerable. "Avoid causing Derek any discomfort," she said. "Being around someone like you is a bad influence." Millie made every effort to break up my relationship with Derek. I became more and more alone every day. No one believed me, and I had no one to talk to. It was like to being stuck in a deep hole. After a while, I started avoiding my house. I used to spend my afternoons in the library when I was in middle school. I took a part-time work at a cafe while I was in high school. I left home to attend college. I was made fun of by Millie, who said, "What an emotional child." But I was already determined. I chose to rely on part-time work and scholarships instead of my father's financial assistance. Although it was difficult, living alone was freeing. Without anyone getting in the way, I was free to furnish my room the way I desired. I eventually found employment at an advertising firm. I did not spend much time with my folks. I only sent life updates once every few years. Derek and I only exchanged birthday cards a couple of times a year. Then I met Benton on my 30th birthday. He and I met at work. His family owned several properties in the city and had developed real estate with considerable success. I once worked on an advertising campaign for his real estate business. Naturally, the gap between us grew less as we met more often. Benton exuded a special warmth and welcome. Even when my nervousness caused me to become extremely careful, he replied softly, "You don't need to be so tense." I was able to lower my defenses gradually after hearing those remarks. I made the decision to tell him about my history when we began discussing marriage. I shared with him the emotional scars that had not yet healed, the argument with my stepmother, and the distance from my father. When I was done, Benton took my hand and held it tenderly. A long moment of quiet was followed by his statement, "That must have been hard for you." My eyes began to well up with tears at those words. "But you've come this far by yourself in spite of everything. I believe that's what pulled me to you, your strength." Benton gave me a hug as he said that. Benton never forced me to help out around the house after we were married. Avoid overexerting yourself. Simply take each step as it comes. Those remarks were a huge comfort to someone like me who was afraid of being expected to design the ideal house. I occasionally get dreams that cause me to wake up in the middle of the night. Benton gives me a soft back rub during such moments. Just being there and embracing my presence. No too sentimental or invasive comments. Family isn't necessarily about blood ties. Benton thought to himself one day, we can build our family together. I want it to be a place where your heart can find peace. I felt as though a weight I had been carrying for years had been somewhat relieved by their remarks. Benton gave me the time I needed to recover by gently embracing my frail heart rather than placing the blame on me. Even though I still get overwhelmed sometimes when I think of my childhood home, Benton's advice to take things at your own pace gives me the strength to go forward gradually. Everything changed one day when my father called. It's been a long time, Sally. Derek is moving out on his own, and the apartment is run by Benton's business. I took a deep breath. I never thought my brother would move into one of the most prestigious houses in the city, even though Benton's firm did own several of them. A housewarming celebration is what we have planned. For the first time in a long time, I felt it would be wonderful for the entire family to be together. I froze when I heard those words. Strict rules applied to Benton's company's opulent residences. To protect other residents' privacy and tranquility, it was explicitly forbidden for new renters to have parties. I was hoping you could take care of the meals, Sally. You'll see to it, won't you? I briefly considered warning him, but I was deterred by my shame from the previous 25 years. This may be my opportunity. Got it, was my response. I'll handle everything. Together with my friend Paula, a cook, I ordered a sumptuous course meal. I assured Paula that I would pay for everything. Are you sure about this? She said, her expression bewildered. Yes, I said with a smile. It's a rare family gathering. I got ready in my best attire and went to the location on the day of the celebration. The image I saw when I opened the door has not altered in 25 years. Millie was in the middle of the room, surrounded by the family members. Millie responded, "Oh, my Sally," in a smooth voice. "You arrived. It still seems as simple as ever. However, given your social phobia, I didn't anticipate you coming at all." The family members laughed quietly. Despite his uncomfortable face, my father remained silent. Derek shouted, "Sally, Mom used to talk about you a lot. How are you feeling? I've heard that you've been having mental health issues and that you don't get along well with others." I looked at the clock and grinned softly. In half an hour, the meal would be delivered. "So how's work going?" Millie smiled mischievously as she inquired. "I've heard that you work for a large advertising firm. It's amazing that you were able to enter such a place. You must have been really fortunate. However, given your unstable mental condition, is there even a job you can manage?" I kept grinning in silence. Maybe thinking I was weak, Millie didn't hold back when she attacked. "Well, I guess you're doing your hardest in your own unique manner. Most likely, there are helpful individuals all around you. Your condition must be causing everyone to feel sorry for you. Your husband must have married you out of pity, right?" Millie said, relishing her air of superiority as the relatives reluctantly laughed. "It's not typical for somebody to want to be with someone like you, who has such unstable mental health." My father stared at the floor and said nothing. Derek was clearly uncomfortable as he stood next to his mother. "Oh, I apologize. I was only telling the truth. Will I be portrayed as the antagonist once more?" Millie put her palm on her chest in a dramatic manner. I looked at the clock once more. I had 15 minutes left. A little grin curled at the corner of my lips as I stood still. The dinner arrived just as planned. Opulent appetizers, main dishes, and desserts, all prepared with specially ordered ingredients and the best quality. Millie said, "This is such wonderful food. However, do you really think you can afford such costly catering? Is your pay even sufficient to cover it?" Once more there was laughter. I had been waiting for this time. I took out my phone, placed it on speaker so that everyone could hear, and contacted the apartment management company. "This is property management," the response said. "This is Sally, Benton's wife." The tone instantly changed to OMRS. Benton on the other end. "I want to verify Derek's leasing agreement's clause S parties are expressly forbidden, and infractions result in instant expulsion, right?" There was silence in the room. The atmosphere froze. "Yes, it is accurate. It is completely forbidden to have housewarming celebrations. The lease is immediately terminated in the event that a violation is verified." Millie's face lost its color. In a startled stillness, my father stood. "There's actually a party happening right now with over 30 guests," I replied. "What?" Millie made an attempt to interrupt. I went on, "I also have photographic evidence. Even social media is live streaming it. This is a major contract violation." The management company's voice became harsh. Derek glanced to my father, appearing perplexed. "What's happening? Did the contract actually contain such a clause?" With a dejected expression, my father started to explain. "Well, the deal said that no parties were permitted. However, Millie assured me it would be all right." Derek said in an angry tone, "Dad, why didn't you check? My leasing agreement is in danger because of you." Millie's face changed drastically. "It's okay. Doesn't Sally's husband oversee the property? You are the owner's wife. There is something you can do about this." She went on to say, "It's just a family gathering." "This isn't merely a family matter," I said. "It's a matter of a formal lease agreement." My father's countenance was bewildered as he saw us. "Sally, why have you become so cold?" "The one who's cold is you, Dad," I said, fighting to control my feelings. "You've never given my feelings a second consideration since Mom died. You now refer to this as a family?" Millie objected strongly. "You're not aware of how difficult it was for us. You treat your stepmother so badly simply because I'm not your biological mother." The doorbell rang at that very time. It was Benton when I opened the door. He took his phone out. "Well, I'll have to call the cops then. This is a contract violation." The air went cold. Millie shuddered in rage as my father, looking pale, gazed at her. "Sally, please," my father begged, his eyes searching mine. "Just this once, can't you let it go?" I gave a headshake. Rules are rules. Exceptions are not possible. The celebration was ultimately called off. While Millie wailed furiously, the relatives who had gathered left with discontent on their faces. Nothing more occurred that day, despite the police being summoned, who affirmed that it was a civil matter to be settled in court. But there's no question that the police involvement was a clear message to them. My father sent me a lengthy email that evening. To Sally, "The things that happened today may have permanently damaged our bond as father and daughter. As a parent, I am really upset by your choice, but I understand it. Despite Millie's efforts to embrace you as her daughter, you still cause her pain. Enough is enough. Please don't continue to tread on our hearts. I'm forced to support Millie if it means severing my relationship with you. Goodbye, Dad." I read that email several times. I had no regrets, yet I was SAD. "It's over?" I informed Benton. He gave me a quiet hug. As a result of the contract violation, the apartment lease was ultimately invalid. Derek later came to see me at work. "I really apologize, Sally. Mom insisted that everything would be well and pushed through even though I hadn't read the contract carefully. Even a new apartment that fits my budget was identified by you. I'm not sure how to express my gratitude." "Don't worry about it," I said. "Benton worked it out with the management company." "But there's one thing I've realized," Derek said, his face grave. "I've had enough of heedlessly accepting anything Mom says. She continued to isolate you for 25 years, and now I see that it has been a recurring pattern. 'Leave your sister alone. She's sick,' she would constantly say. However, that was also incorrect. Derek grasped my hand. "From now on, things will be different. I'm available to you. I promise not to let anyone harm you ever again." Ironically, my brother and I grew closer as a result of this experience. It has been 3 years since then. Neither Millie nor my father have gotten in touch with me. Derek and I continue to communicate on occasion, and he occasionally eats with my family. I've received updates on our parents from Derek. My father and Millie seem to be heading toward a divorce. The activities at the party served as the trigger. It became evident that I had never had any mental illness and was doing well in my job at the advertising business. Benton has also had great success with his real estate company, and the industry really respects our reputation as a pair. Our relatives' attitude drastically shifted when it became evident that Millie's rumors were untrue. My father started to feel terrible for blindly following his wife and ignoring his daughter's advice for 25 years. He allegedly said, "I believed everything you said," as he and Millie were having a disagreement. Although Millie continues to maintain her self-assured posture, she is now alone and has lost the respect of people around her. It's ironic that she's now in the same situation that I was. I've heard from my father on several occasions. Apologies and requests for reconciliation abound in his texts, but I am unable to reply. Even while I am capable of forgiving, I am aware that our connection will never be the same. Love and understanding are not always guaranteed by blood connections. I have a family of my own now. Benton and I have been fortunate to have a daughter, Lily, during the past 3 years. She has made me happier than ever. In our living room, there is a large picture of my mother. I occasionally share anecdotes about Lily's grandma with her. I remark, "Your grandma was a very kind person," and a sensation of warmth comes over me. While some ties are made, others are lost. I guess that's what life is. I take Lily to my mother's grave on the weekends. "Mom, I'm happy now," I say to her in my heart as I clasp my hands together in prayer. "I will teach Lily the love you taught me." The flowers on the tomb swing softly in the breeze. My mother seems to be giving me a gentle nod of approval. I've made the decision to lie forward-looking. Although it wasn't a simple decision, I think it's the correct one.
It seems like a broken kaleidoscope in my life. At the age of 28, I'm starting to doubt all of my previous beliefs on the ties that bind families together. Emma Johnson is my name. I had a modest but contented existence until yesterday. But when my stepsister Becky barged into our house, that tranquility was destroyed. We must go back 20 years, to when I was 8 years old, in order to comprehend this occurrence. Our idyllic family life disintegrated. My mother smiled as she always does to start the day. "Have a good day." She said this cheerfully as she sent my father and me out, and I said, "See you later." But that was the last time I would ever speak to my mother. The mother who waved goodbye that morning will never return. Who could have predicted? While traveling to the store, she got into a car accident. I was standing in front of my teacher's desk when I got the news. I knew that something irrevocable had happened when I witnessed my aunt sobbing in the staff room. My father. I joined the school chorus when I was 13 years old. One of my rare getaways was singing. I eventually got a solo role in the spring concert after practicing every day after school. However, my happiness was fleeting. Becky also suddenly became interested in the choir. She was naturally gifted, and the teachers soon trusted her because of her lovely clear voice. She quickly received the solo portion I had been preparing for weeks. According to the teacher, Becky is more suited for it. I had to sing in Becky's shadow after being relegated to the back row. Becky would make fun of my singing and imitate it too much, even while we were practicing at home, which made everyone laugh. I practiced every day, but I remember my heart stopping as my father stated, laughing, "Well, if Becky is more suited for it, then it can't be helped." Patty abruptly grew harsh as I began to express this in a shaky voice. "Emma, can't you just admit it? It's natural that there are differences in talent. Becky was born with a musical gift, Stop dragging others down. It's Becky's chance to shine. As her older sister, you should be supporting her. My dad gave a nod of approval. That's right. Be thankful that Becky is singing instead. I sobbed softly in my room that night. I could hear Becky and Patty joyfully rehearsing their song from the hallway. They would occasionally chuckle together while mimicking me. The practice at home grew the next day. Patty's grin would light up as she praised Becky each time she sang in the living room. That's wonderful. Becky constantly inserted an approximation of my singing whenever I was around. We have to make sure not to end up like Emma. Every time, my parents only observed with satisfaction. My presence was only a shadow to draw attention to Becky. Occasionally, my father would even add, she should take a lesson. It was more than just singing. It permeated both my role at home and my time at school. I started to slowly withdraw into my shell after that. I turned into a shadowy figure at school, spending the most of my recesses in the library. The only location free from Becky's influence was there. I made a crucial error when I was 15. Becky and I shared a secret. It had to do with my affections for Alex Ford, a classmate. Despite Becky's influence, Alex was one of the few people who spoke to me in a normal way. He was also amusing and nice. I grew to like him over time when we were on the library committee together. Unusually, Becky was friendly to me one evening. I dropped my guard, desperate for a sisterly exchange. I like Alex, I told my stepsister, who had come to me with a surprising amount of warmth about my long-held affections. Don't worry, I'll support you. I can still clearly recall the playful glitter in Becky's eyes when she told me that. I had no clue that the most embarrassing event of my life would follow this revelation. The following morning, Becky informed me. Alex said he wants to talk to you, and told me to wait in the cafeteria for him. That day, I prepared more thoroughly than normal. I straightened the folds of my uniform skirt perfectly and combed my hair many times. My heartbeat quickened with a mix of fear and excitement as noon drew near. Instead of taking my customary lunch break in the library, I decided to stroll into the unusually packed restaurant as Alex arrived, already feeling the eyes. My students usually wouldn't care about someone like me, but today they seemed to be anticipating something. A familiar voice said, "Oh, Emma," and I turned to see Alex. There was his normal warm smile, but something seemed strange. Becky and her group were behind him. Listen, everybody. Alex's voice reverberated across the cafeteria. My heart was hammering hard. It seems there's a rumor that Emma and I like each other. It seemed as though time had frozen at that very moment. My first reaction was, this is all Becky's prank. I don't see you that way. I'm sorry. His words pierced my heart like a dagger, but his voice was kind. All around us, laughter broke out. When someone remarked, I thought so. Poor thing, said another. Becky's eyes were smiling, yet she had a regretful expression. The laughing from that moment still occasionally recurs in my nightmares. My body refused to move, even though I wanted to flee. After a while, someone said, poor thing, and that was the catalyst that got me moving at last. Running to the library is not something I recall. As usual, I was shaky in the back seat, attempting to escape inside Anne of Green Gables, but I was unable to see through the tears when I recognized it. I was summoned to the staff room after school. My teacher inquired, "Why did you skip class?" But I was unable to respond. But when I tried to speak with my folks at home, it was much more difficult. Becky was on the move already, exaggeratedly crying, she clarified. I just wanted to create a chance for her to talk to the guy she likes. She said I was fabricating the facts to harm her image and that it was all a misunderstanding. With a back rub, Patty stated, it was all with good intentions to Becky. My dad concurred. If you were more proactive like Becky, these misunderstandings wouldn't happen. I was hurt by their remarks, which seemed like physical abuse. Life in high school was much more painful. Becky obtained her driver's license ahead of me and was given unfettered use of the family car even after she was caught drinking at a party. I was informed I wasn't responsible enough when I asked to use the automobile for a school assignment. Becky's poor grades were tolerated since she was preoccupied with clubs and her social life, while I received criticism for not working hard enough when my grades declined. Even our accomplishments received distinct treatment. They hosted a celebratory party for our family members when Becky joined the cheer squad. All I received when I won a county essay contest was a simple well done and a slap on the back. I went as far away as I could to attend a school in Los Angeles when I was 18, using college as an escape. The relocation was the first step toward mental freedom and represented more than simply physical separation. It was a fresh start in college life. After being released from Becky's control, I gradually started to take back my identity. I worked part-time, lived on my own, and studied hard in the literary department. It wasn't a whole freedom, though. Becky seized every chance to make subtle jabs about my appearance, even though I avoided family contacts. My final year of college was a watershed in my life. I went to a special lecture in the literature department called Family Images in Modern Literature, since I was having trouble finding a job and was worried about the future. David Owen, a young novelist, was the lecturer that day. His depictions of intricate family dynamics struck a deep chord with me. We happened to meet in the library after the lecture and had a heated discussion about literature. He really listened to my viewpoints and debated them with me on an equal footing, occasionally presenting incisive rebuttals. For the first time in years, the voice I had repressed was really heard by someone. It was an intellectually stimulating period as well. I was invited to David's research lab as a result of this interaction. At first, we spoke about literature, but with time, we started talking about more personal subjects. I initially told my family's tale one rainy evening, including my father's lack of interest and the psychological torture I had received from my stepsister and stepmother. David ended the lengthy pause after I was done by saying, "That's abuse, Emma." Something within of me was opened by his words. He went on, "Why don't you try writing a novel about your experiences someday?" He saw a gift in me that I had not noticed, and his recommendation included more than simply creative advice. I got a job in the proofreading division of a nearby publishing business when I graduated. Although it was simple, it offered insightful information about the bookmaking process. I began meeting David on the weekends. I started writing a novel in addition to my employment under his tutelage. Despite the awkwardness of my early writing, he carefully proofread it. "You have talent. I believe it's my role to nurture it." I was comforted by his remarks. David and I got closer over time, and finally we started dating. A major turning point in our relationship happened at 6 months in. Afternoon of Reminiscence, David's most recent novel, was ultimately chosen for an award. My life took a significant turn after that. I even began to feature in weekly publications as the girlfriend of a well-known writer. Becky also called in a nasty manner. "Isn't this just a publicity stunt?" I thought about ending my relationship with David one time, but I was more sheltered than ever by David. "You are the source of my creativity. I never want to let you go." The proposition arrived in a surprising manner. It took place on the day when a literary magazine awarded my debut book, Memories Within, a newcomer's prize. David showed me his research lab during the prize ceremony. I discovered a notepad he had kept there since our first meeting, where he had recorded our discussions. "From the moment I met you, I knew I wanted to weave stories with you." He had a surprise ring ready. It looked like the pearl ring from Anne of Green Gables, which is my favorite book. "Will you join me, not just as fellow writers, but as partners in life?" With tears running down my cheeks, I nodded. My father and Patty's response to the news of our impending marriage was expected. "Can you really lead a stable life with a writer? Isn't there someone better out there?" Becky, meanwhile, frowned openly. "I can't believe you got married before me." But I was a different person now. My time with David had taught me the value of myself and given me the courage to voice my thoughts. I decide my own life. We had a tiny yet sweet wedding. I was greeted by David's parents as though I were their own daughter. As we exchanged vows, David stated, "We understand and accept each other's stories and create new ones together. That's what our marriage means to us." We purchased a home in the New York suburbs after getting married. A top-notch security camera system was the gift David gave me, for your protection and for the family we're going to build together. His vigilance filled me with a deep sense of affection. I left the publishing firm and started working as a writer full-time. David continued to be both my first reader and my worst critic. Despite our periodic disagreements, we regarded them as a necessary component of the creative process. Your words have a special power. It is my responsibility to fully realize that. We read each other's papers and talked late into the night while working side by side at our desks. We were happy throughout these times. Having come from a skewed family, I had discovered a new form of family where we encouraged and helped one another. Our tale would undoubtedly be great. I was certain of this till the day Becky arrived to ruin our tranquil existence. I was working on a fresh, original idea in my home office. I was home alone when the doorbell rang, and David was out attending a meeting with his publisher. I had a gut feeling that something negative was going to occur. On the monitor, Becky was clutching a bag and looked unkempt and unclean, unlike her normal self. "Come on, I must speak with you." She sounded a little raspy and exhausted. She started kicking the potted plants at the door when I didn't answer. I deserved to be happy too. I went to investigate after being startled by the commotion and discovered her attempting to use a tool to break the lock. I heard the door open just as I was ready to dial 911. I hadn't returned the key that had been given to Patty, so she had entered using a spare key. "What made you marry before I did? You get to be joyful, but why?" "I've lost everything, including my job and my boyfriend's expulsion." Becky screamed and barged into the living room. Her luggage included enough clothing for many days, as I could see. She flung books off the shelf into the floor and broke the vases. I was horrified to see David's papers and my manuscripts flying everywhere. "I'm going to ruin everything. Your contented existence is a lie. I have nothing to go back to at all." Then my wedding album caught her eye. Something in me broke the instant she began to rip the pages. Becky shoved me as I urgently attempted to stop her. I nearly passed out when I struck my head against the wall. The front door opened, and I heard it. "Emma!" David's voice was heard. After returning early from his meeting, he instantly realized what was going on and put Becky in a restraint. The police showed up shortly after. Becky was taken into custody on charges of property damage and trespassing. Since David was a well-known author, he had placed security cameras both inside and outside our house in case something happened. "I thought it was necessary to protect you," he stated. His assessment was accurate. Everything was captured on video, including Becky's violent conduct and her incursion. David and I immediately made the decision to bring a civil case in addition to criminal accusations. David's buddy, a talented attorney, volunteered to take on our case. The security camera footage would be the conclusive proof. Furthermore, it would support our claim for damages if we could provide evidence of the previous mistreatment. At first, Patty and my father attempted to step in. They even recommended that since it was a family issue, it should be resolved amicably. But David said sharply, "This is a crime. This has to be thoroughly resolved, including the long-term abuse Emma endured." Becky abruptly presented herself as a victim in the courtroom. I also had pain. I felt alone. Since my birth, I have lived with my mother. But the film from the security cameras clearly showed the truth: her planned invasion, her sporadic acts of devastation, and the brutality she committed on me. During the trial, it became clear why Becky had become so desperate. Becky, who was well known for her pride and sometimes controlling demeanor toward her bosses, disregarded all advice and made several mistakes in a pivotal client campaign when she was employed at a large advertising firm. In a fit of rage, the customer ended a multi-million-dollar contract. The business lost money, and Becky was let go right away. She had also been living with her boyfriend for 2 years, but on the date of her dismissal, She was evicted because she insisted on receiving pricey presents and would often pout if she wasn't brought to upscale restaurants. Her unemployment seemed to have been the final straw for him. She thought about going back to her parents' house after losing both her job and her house. But she was too proud to tell Patty about her breakup and firing. These incidents pushed Becky over the limit, and she attempted to ruin my joyful existence. I also provided documentation of the years of abuse, including testimonies, diaries, and photos, all of which backed up my allegations. As the trial went on, David made a suggestion. "Why don't you turn your life story into a novel?" I was apprehensive at first, but I discovered that writing helped me arrange my ideas. I felt my emotional wounds slowly becoming better as I confronted my experience and put it into words. My writings were painstakingly edited by David. The story was polished under his direction. More attention than anticipated was paid to the manuscripts that were submitted to the publisher. "This work will resonate with many people," the editor stated. As promised by the editor, The Broken Kaleidoscope attracted a lot of interest. Many readers found resonance in the novel, which showed familial abuse and the mending of emotional wounds. We emerged from the trial completely victorious. Becky had to pay a sizable sum in damages, in addition to facing criminal consequences. The court noted in the ruling that I had been the victim of long-term psychological abuse. This was a major life-turning event for me. My father and Patty gave their actions a lot of thought after the verdict. In particular, my father expressed regret and acknowledged his frailty in failing to protect me. "I am solely to blame. I fled, ignoring the warning indications. I sincerely apologize." I had been waiting for these words for years. After the ruling, I had my first kid a year later. "I want to give this child a loving environment," I said. David nodded silently next to me. "We will make sure of it." The arrival of his granddaughter also caused my father to shift. He is attempting to make up for the time he missed with his daughter after divorcing Patty. I've started writing a sequel to The Broken Kaleidoscope, which is rumored to be adapted into a film. Others who are going through similar things appear to find solace in my experiences. I get messages every day from people who say, "Your story gave me courage." My descriptions of the process of mending a wounded heart may be beneficial to others. This gives me a sense of redemption for the pain I went through. David is still my sympathetic and understanding companion. I am still developing as a woman and as a writer because of him. I think of Becky sometimes. She is undergoing counseling and has completed her sentence. Although she is not allowed to speak with me directly, she has apologized in writing via her attorney. For the first time, when I read it, I could relate to her anguish. I acknowledged that she was also a victim of a problematic familial dynamic, even if I still can't forgive her. My infant is sleeping in my arms right now. This child's grin motivates me to keep creating a nurturing atmosphere.